Welcome to day 16 of our scripture reading and daily encouragement. Today we're going to cover Genesis chapters 42 and 43, and we're going to cover the rest of Matthew 14, which is 22 through 36. So as we pick up in the story in Genesis, Joseph has become the person who is second in command of Pharaoh. He's divvying out the grain that he'd helped store up in the 7 prosperous years. But the famine's starting to affect Jacob, his dad. He's starting to affect him and his family in the land of Canaan. So Jacob has to send the brothers of Joseph to Egypt. And when they get there, they're coming to Joseph, bowing before him, asking, begging for food. And they don't recognize him. Joseph recognizes his brothers, but they don't recognize him. And so it fulfills the dream. It says Joseph remembers the dream that he had. The first thing that got his brothers mad at him way back was the dream that they would be bowing down before him. And now this has happened. So here's why I want to take this. We don't know exactly how many years it had been, but here's what we do know. He was 17 when he had that dream. He was 30 when he started serving Pharaoh, so that's 13 years. He had been at least through the 7 prosperous years, so that gives you 20 years. So he was somewhere in that second set of 7 years. So it was somewhere between 20 and 27 years. It doesn't tell us exactly at what point they have to go to Egypt to get food, but it's been 20 plus years since he had a dream. And I just want to stop there for a second. Some of us can't wait 20 minutes on God, 20 days, much less 20 years. People will come to us and say, I've had a dream. Help me interpret this dream. And then they're discouraged because they don't feel like that dream came true. This was 20 plus years between the time he had the dream and it came true. So that's a huge encouragement right there. And I think that's what's so exciting for me about this story is that when I think God tells me something's going to happen, or I think he shows me a vision or shows me something, but it doesn't happen in the time frame I think it should, I often think back to the story of Joseph. Joseph probably didn't understand why it took 20 years. He probably didn't understand why he had to go through being thrown in the cistern, sold to the slaves, end up in Potiphar's house, ended up in jail, and then before he served Pharaoh. But it took every one of those things happening to get him to the point where he would serve his brothers. And the significance there is him giving food to them preserved that line. It preserved that family. And remember, Jesus came out of that. So this is a huge piece of the story. It's been 20 plus years. The brothers don't recognize Joseph. He recognizes them, but he starts playing a little game with them. He creates a little drama. He recognizes that Benjamin, the youngest brother, which is his only full brother, is not there. So he sends them back and he baits them with the money back in their packs, and they get home and they're scared to death. By the way, they had to leave one brother there in prison, Simeon. But when they get home, they're scared to death to take Benjamin back. And Jacob is too scared to send Benjamin back because they think they're going to be considered thieves for taking the money back. So they hold out as long as they can. And finally, they're running out of food again. So Jacob has to send Benjamin with them. It's kind of like, well, I don't want Benjamin to die, but if I don't send Benjamin with them and go back for more food, we're all going to die. So Jacob sends them back. And when they get there, Joseph welcomes them. At this point, they still don't recognize Joseph. He still hasn't revealed himself to them. But he welcomes them in, feeds them, prepares a lavish meal for them. And I can't imagine being in their shoes, but they realize, oh my gosh, we're being punished. They're thinking that he's baiting them in and then going to make them slaves and that sort of thing. So again, the biggest encouragement out of this is be patient with God. Sometimes he may show you something, but it may be many years before it unfolds. For me, I was first shown that I was supposed to go into ministry at the age of 23. But when some things didn't immediately happen, I gave up and I started living a different life. And it was 13 years later before I felt that call again. And that was confusing to me. But I look back and say, wow, that wasn't as long as Joseph had to go. And my journey and my path wasn't nearly as painful as Joseph's. So I want you to be encouraged by that. We jump over to the New Testament, to Matthew 14, and this is a famous story. So Jesus had found out John the Baptist had been beheaded. He was mourning. Immediately, all these people are there. He's healing and teaching and feeding. He's got to be exhausted. He sends the disciples out in a boat, and it says he goes up into the hills to pray by himself. But then when he comes to meet the disciples, he's actually walking to them on water. They're in a storm. They're terrified. Jesus is walking on water, and they thought he was a ghost. And I just think it's funny to look at this. They've watched him do so many miracles. They've watched him feed thousands of people, but yet they still doubt who he is when they see him coming at him. But when Peter recognizes him, Peter, as he often does, he just jumps out of the boat. He's got his eyes on Jesus. He's walking on water with Jesus, but then he takes his eyes off Jesus and sees the waves and the wind. In other words, he had fear. When he saw Jesus, he goes walking towards Jesus. He's got faith. He's walking on water. But when he takes his eyes off Jesus, he immediately is overcome with fear of the real world, the fear of the waves, and the fact that he's in water, and he begins to sink. And he begs for Jesus to save him. And Jesus does, but he says, you've got, oh, ye of little faith once again. But my point here is, guys, here's our encouragement. You keep your eyes on Jesus. You keep your faith in Jesus, no matter the storm. So maybe you're in the scenario of Joseph. Maybe you're being thrown into prison. Maybe you're being accused of things you didn't do. Maybe you're being beat up by your brothers. Maybe you're being sold as a slave. And I know those things might not literally be happening, but figuratively, those things might be happening in your life. Flip over to this encouragement. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Keep your eyes on Jesus, and keep your faith there, and you'll literally walk on water. But the moment you turn your eyes off Jesus, the moment you turn your eyes off faith in him, you're going to start sinking to the fears of the world. To me, this is two incredibly encouraging stories, and I hope you're encouraged by it today as well. Have a great day.